Okay, so in this demonstration, I'm going to talk about the middle ground, and I'm also going to be working on the background. I like to work kind of like top to bottom of the page because things that are in the background should be higher on the page typically, unless you have something big in the foreground that's like overlapping stuff in the background. And then kind of work my way down. That way I'm less likely to smudge anything that's down here. But I do have my locked in value and depth in those areas, so I do want to make sure that I protect those areas with a piece of paper. So in the background area, so areas like close to the horizon, I am going to end up having some of the complements of the colors mixed into those areas. So where I have like this green foliage, I'm going to apply a little red in there and mix it with the green to lower the intensity of the green, to make the green less vibrant. In the blues and the water, I can even add a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of orange there to kind of like lower the intensity a bit. I can also use less contrast between the textures that I put in the water too. So I am going to do more demonstrations specifically about different textures for like water, trees, rocks in the future, so that way you have that to kind of refer to as well. But right now, today, I just want to talk about kind of lowering the intensity of colors that are in the distance. Colors that are closer up in the middle ground are going to have less of the complements mixed in with them. They're going to be more intense and brighter, but in the shadow areas, I still want to add some of the complements in those places. I'm also going to add a little bit of blue to things in the distance to create that atmospheric perspective. So things that are further away should have a little bit of a cast of blue to them, typically because of the atmospheric buildup of the space between kind of what's close and what's further away. And then as it gets closer and more down towards the middle ground, there will be more detail and more contrast. Some of the detail is going to be textures that I demonstrate to you later. But anyway, here I go. Okay, so I'm going to continue to just build up more layers of colored pencil, and so I'm going back into the shadow areas and kind of just reinforcing the darkest spots in those areas with some colored pencil, just applying like the cast shadows to the rocks, working in some textures, whether it be hatching or scumbling to mimic the different textures of the rocks with both kind of like a purple and a brown. In the tree area, I did add some red and I did add some green over top of that. I also put a little bit of like light blue kind of over that background area in the distance. I will go into the water as well and just kind of build up some layers there. But I'm not making anything too super contrasty. I actually do at one point go over the background area a little bit with some white just to kind of like muddle it a little bit and just kind of soften it, make it less contrasty. And so you just want to continue to add layers of color and a little bit more texture to kind of your background, and then working towards your middle ground. As you get closer, things should get sharper in detail and get more detailed. And so as I work into these rocks, I'm going to start to really kind of pump up the contrast a little bit more compared to the background. Not as much as it will be in the foreground though. But that's kind of the application that you want to put forth right now. Okay, so to recap, you want to make sure that in the background you're adding the complement to some of the colors to make sure that you're lowering the intensity of those colors. And you want to make sure that you're softening it a little bit with some blue or some white to create that atmospheric perspective. As you work up to the middle ground, add more contrast and detail to that area, but you still want to keep it loose and gestural using application of techniques like hatching, feathering, scumbling, to create that Impressionism style. Okay, so the distant background should be softer, should have some atmospheric perspective to it. Coming towards the middle ground, it should become slightly sharper, have more contrast, more detail, more texture to it. And then you should have an unfinished foreground. That's where we're going to go next, is working on texture specifically for that area. And that will also spill into the middle ground a bit too. But this is the kind of application and atmospheric perspective you want to have at this point.